Hello, and welcome to How to Have a Ridiculously Good Nurse Career. Beat burnout, navigate this broken healthcare system, and love what you do. This is going to be let me just switch the slide here. This is going to be a 60-minute call. I will be teaching you for the good portion of it. At the end, we're going to have a Q&A. So if you have any questions, save them, keep them for the end. And you can message those with me if you're watching the replay. And then at the end of the call, before we do that Q&A, I'm going to talk about what it looks like to work with me one-on-one in my nurse burnout coaching program. And then lastly, the replay will be emailed out for those of you who require it. So to start with, I want to make sure that you're in the right place. So if you feel like you're burnt out, and at this point, it seems like there is really nothing that you can do to change it, you've tried everything. You've tried self-care practices, maybe you've tried therapy, you've snuck a massage in here or there, you got your nails done, and yet you still feel drained and exhausted, and it seems like nothing you really do is going to change that. And you've basically just been waiting for the healthcare system to change so that you can enjoy your experience of nursing more, then you're in the right place. Burnout is something that people from all different professions can experience, but healthcare seems to be a very common place that burnout is experienced. And there's three components that pretty much everybody experiences from burnout. And then there's an additional component that is navigating our broken healthcare system and just like the life and death situations that we see on a regular basis as healthcare workers is something that is unique to healthcare professionals and nurses. So really, to start with, physical burnout is that kind of burnout that you are physically drained and exhausted. You're constantly tired. You feel like you could sleep for a month and that probably wouldn't even be enough. That's like you go on vacation and sit on the beach and drink pina coladas for a week, and then you come home and you feel just as drained and exhausted. That is physical burnout, where you just don't have any energy left in your body. Your battery is on negative percentage. Mental burnout is really like that not feeling like you have that capacity to respond to situations in a way that you want. You feel like you're constantly reacting, and it doesn't feel like you even have that capacity to choose how you respond and how you handle a situation. You're always just like in the moment, just trying to figure it out, just trying to wade through the deep end to get through the other side. It's never like that you have that intentionality with it. So this also can be with you're stuck in just constantly in the worst case scenario. Everything is going wrong. It sucks. Like there's never a way out of this. I just feel completely burnt out, drained, exhausted, like nursing is never going to get better. That kind of mentality is something that's really common with mental burnout. The third component of burnout is emotional. This is where you hear people talk about like compassion fatigue and stuff like that. And this basically is where we have emotionally drained ourselves. And as a nurse, and I know a lot of other nurses that I work with, we tend to be empaths. So it's very easy for us to take on the emotional experience of our patients. And if our patients are going through something traumatic, we can often take that on for ourselves, which drains us even more and takes us away from the ability to care for our other patients, to show up for ourselves. So this is that emotional exhaustion. And a personal kind of like way of showing this, which I feel like is easier for some people, is like imagine your friend just came to you and they had broken up or got divorced from their significant other, and they're telling you about this situation, and you are just like, I can't even deal with this right now. I have so much on my own plate. I am just like, I got too much going on. Like, I can't even be there for that friend. That is emotional exhaustion to its T. And then the fourth component, as I already earlier mentioned, is basically all of the pressures and the stresses that are put on us by our healthcare system. There is so much stressors that happen, whether it be short staffing, increased patient acuity, management styles and personalities, but also just the life and death situations that we deal with on a regular basis do contribute to our burnout experience. Also, just like working night shifts and holidays, all of these things add to our burnout experience. So if you're in this state, it's okay that you are frustrated and exhausted. You've probably even considered quitting. You may have tried moving units and changing hospitals, but at the end of the day, the system is the system. So the problem of burnout is going to follow you. But you know that you want this to work. You know that you want to actually figure out a way to enjoy your nursing career, because the thought of doing this for another like 10 or 20 years is terrifying. There's no way you can be this miserable for another 10 or 20 years. So this is really the difference, and I'm going to talk about how to actually create this so that you can actually have a nursing job without sacrificing your well-being. Nurses are some of the most resourceful people I know. You are capable of figuring this out, and they resourceful in that they handle challenging situations on a continuous basis and yet are so determined to figure this out. So this is how I know that nurses as individuals can create a career that they enjoy, because I've done it before and I help clients do it because of this resiliency, this resourcefulness, and this capability that nurses have to be able to handle all the shit that healthcare throws at you and still come out the other side. So by the end of this masterclass, I'm going to help you go from being miserable, from never having enough time or energy to care for your patients and yourself, to having the energetic capacity to handle anything that healthcare and nursing throws at you so you can go home at the end of your shift feeling like you actually have energy left over for your family and your friends. I'm going to help you put yourself to go from putting yourself last, saying yes when you actually mean no, and having that sense of resentment for feeling guilty about saying yes, to being able to take your breaks at a reasonable time, actual meal times. I know that's like a foreign concept, but actually having meals in like that mealtime frame would be amazing. Being able to go pee, being able to actually fuel your body and hydrate yourself, and say no to extra shifts without feeling guilty. I'm going to help you go from resenting your job and career because you can't care for your patients in the way that you want to recognizing your best nursing skills and figuring out how to utilize them to fit and create your right nursing job. Maybe it's where you are right now, or maybe it's in a new unit. So if this is you and you want to make this work, then this is the masterclass for you. Over the next hour, here's what we're going to do. You're going to learn how to eliminate nurse burnout and feel better in your job so that you cannot feel that dread every single time your alarm goes off in the morning, so that you don't need to take days to recover and days to prepare to go back to work, so that you're not a walking zombie just going through the motions trying to get by. I'm going to teach you my process for creating resilient nurse boundaries, so that you can stop feeling guilty and you can put yourself first. For example, like if you have 3 shifts in a row and then your team lead is coming up to you and asking you, oh, we're really short for tomorrow, can you come in? But you're already drained and exhausted and you have plans for tomorrow. Being able to say, no, I can't, without it being like, oh, I feel so bad for not saying no, and like being a victim of like being guilted into coming in when you really don't want to. If it's also just not putting yourself last in being like, I need to do these 87 tasks before I go pee. No, go pee and do the 87 tasks. Our body, our physical needs are important, and we need to care for ourselves and our well-being in order to be a better nurse, to be better for ourselves and feel better overall. I will teach you the process of creating your best nursing career, because the truth is you don't want to waste all the time, the money, the energy that you've put into this career. You want to like this career. You feel like your work matters and that you're making a difference. I'm going to teach you how to create that job that you can actually enjoy. So basically, like, who am I to tell you all of these things? My name is Jana Holterman. I am still an active bedside nurse, and I also am a burnout coach who helps nurses navigate this broken healthcare system so they can heal their burnout and create careers that they actually enjoy. So my burnout experience, I feel like, is something that, of course, is important. Everybody wants to know my story, to say, like, who are you to talk to me about this? I am not a special snowflake. I did not just like have these skills. I had to learn them the hard way to be able to cultivate them so that I could help others do them. So I was one of those people who wasn't really sure what they wanted to do. I chose nursing because I liked the healthcare, I liked the critical thinking side, the science of it, and I liked helping people. So I went into nursing. I worked as a nurse's aide through college, and then I had also worked in a doctor's office through high school into my first 2 years of college, the second 2 years of college, getting my bachelor's degree. I did right into my bachelor's of nursing. I worked as a nurse's aide. So I'd already been in the healthcare field and seeing that. And so while I was working as a nurse's aide, I was working for a float pool. So I just decided I'll just start my RN nursing career in the float pool that I had been working before. So I was in a massive hospital system. I floated between 3 separate hospitals and went to like every medical surgical unit under the sun. And of course, as being a float pool nurse tends to be, you get handed the difficult assignments, whether it be like physically, emotionally, mentally heavy assignments, the patients that the floor nurses were tired of dealing with. And so I basically had those patients back to back on different shifts. I was also going to one of the like more remote hospitals in that hospital system, and they like did not have a lot of RNs on those floors because it was a small hospital. And so I would be like in charge as like a relatively new grad, being in charge of a floor that I'd been on a handful of times before and like having no idea what I was doing. And so very quickly I just was like, I think I made a mistake. What am I doing? There's no way this is gonna be it. I feel like I am just like overworked, run off my feet. I don't think I'm like, I just didn't feel valued. I didn't feel appreciated. I was just like, I don't know what I'm going to do. Like, I'm just drained, exhausted, and I have no idea what I want for myself. So in school, I had done my like final placement in critical care, and I enjoyed that. So I was like, I want to get back to critical care. So I basically begged my manager of the float pool to put me in the critical care float. After a while, I did switch into critical care float. I'm like, this is going to be better. I get to use my critical thinking. It's going to be, better patient ratios, all these things. And that did improve some things because yes, it was like this new learning curve and I was like learning exciting things, and my patients were a little bit more challenging in like the complexity, but I had less patience and those kinds of things. So I was like, okay, this is going to be better. This is it. But then the same experience happened again. I was just like, I don't know, this is not it. Like, I'm drained, I'm exhausted, I don't really know what to do. I was like, CVICU is going to be the answer. I'm gonna like, I like cardiac. I find that interesting. I think this is gonna be the cool place to be. I'm gonna like it. So of course, at that time, you basically had to wait for somebody to retire to get into one of those highly specialized units. But I already had like at least some in because I had been working there as a float nurse. So they knew me, they liked me. After a few months, I was able to get into CVICU as a full-time employee. I got all of the certifications, I got all of the training, I did all of the things, I checked all of the boxes. And then I was like back to square one of being like, I don't know, something's still missing. I just still feel drained. I still feel exhausted. I still feel like, like I'm not being valued. I don't feel like this is what I want to do, but I don't really know what I want to do. So I'm like, I'm going to have to start looking outside of nursing to try to feel better. So what did I do? I hired a personal trainer, got super fit. I got my nutrition on point. I was like doing all these things to take care of myself. I would go and get massages and all this stuff, and all of that stuff helped me feel a little bit better energy wise. It did create some more energy, but I still had that same experience being like, I don't know what I want to do. Like, I can't see myself doing this forever. Like, I just don't feel like I'm making a difference. And like, it doesn't seem like anything I do actually matters. And so my coworkers were lovely people, and they were giving me all the advice, like go back and get your nurse practitioner, get your master's, do these things, you know, check all of those boxes. And I was like, I don't know. I had this gut feeling that that wasn't for me, but I was like, you know what, maybe it is. So I like looked into it and actually was going through the process of applying and stuff like that. And I was just like, had this gut feeling. I'm like, I don't think that's the answer. I don't know what the answer is, but I don't think that's the answer. And I'm glad I listened to that now, knowing what I do know, is I've worked with so many clients who did those things, who got the certifications, who got the extra education, became nurse practitioners, and then realized the experience is the exact same. You just have more education and more student loans. So I started continuing to look because I was like, you know what, it's not totally it. So what I did is I found a life coach and I started working with her. And that was kind of where everything shifted for me, where I was able to just fully figure out what was important for me, who I was as a person, who I was as a nurse, what were my priorities, what were the things that made me feel better in my work, like what made me feel like I was making a difference. And I was able to actually like take that knowledge and understanding of myself and actually implement in strategies. And that just kind of helped me look at the things I wanted to research and look at the things that would help me create the career into what I wanted it to be. And that completely shifted everything for me. I had so many of my coworkers like constantly coming up to me and being like, what has changed? You seem so much happier. Like, what are you doing? Why do you seem so much happier? And I was just kind of like sharing what I was going through. And people were like really amazed by that. And I was like, you know what, maybe this is something that I could do for nurses, because I know I'm not the only one who feels this burnt out, this lost, this like unsure of like getting into this broken healthcare system and being like, how the hell am I supposed to navigate this? Like, you're not taught this in school. Like, what am I supposed to do now? And so I was like, okay, I'm gonna go get my coach training. I went and got my coach training, and I finished that like right in February of 2020. So COVID hit March 2020, and I, of course, like everybody else, was like, what the hell is happening in this healthcare profession? It was the most difficult time to be a nurse. But because I had already spent the time working on my brain and like learning and understanding myself and then doing my own coach training, I was able to have so much more tools and resiliency to be able to handle the difficulties that came in that like year or two, and be able to come through the other side without being nearly as burnt out as I think I would have been on the other side. Like, yes, I was drained and exhausted because it was a difficult and traumatic time to be a nurse, but I think I handled it better than I ever could have imagined, and better than some of my colleagues and coworkers, because of the tools that I had. And supporting myself through that, I was like, every single nurse needs this information. Every single nurse needs to be able to have these resiliency tools to handle the chaos that is healthcare and be able to advocate for themselves like they advocate for their patients, so that they put their well-being first and care for themselves so that they can actually enjoy this career. And that was kind of when I really started to grow my business. And it's been growing ever since then. So now we're getting to the teaching point of, I think first we really need to understand our brains, understand how we interpret our world. My experience of the exact same situation would be different than your experience. And we could have the same background, the same education, and go into that experience and have a different outcome. The reason that our outcomes of that experience are different is because of our brains. Our brains are basically programmed and from all of our life experience, everything that we have learned through infancy, through nursing school, through our preceptors and leaders, all create our understanding and the way that we interpret and interact with this healthcare system and our lives. So it's super important to understand this as kind of the backbone to the way we interact with the world. So basically, at the end of the day, your primitive brain, your subconscious brain is designed to keep you safe. It does this basically by avoiding pain and seeking pleasure. And so it makes complete sense that when you are in pain in your nursing job, when it is constantly putting you in these high stress situations, your brain is seeing that as painful situations that are possibly unsafe for you. And so your brain creates so much dread. No wonder why we have so much dread for going into work. No wonder why we have the pre-shift anxiety scaries before going to work. It's because of this way that our brain is programmed. And so if quitting nursing is not an option for you, like it wasn't for me, it isn't for me now, it isn't for my clients, it's coming from this place of figuring it out. But we need to understand our brains so that we can create this better experience for ourselves of our nursing careers. So what are brain axons and neurons? So basically, we have neural connections in our brain. So any experience we have, your brain creates a new neural connection. The things that we live over and over again get stronger neural connections. We create axons, and these can grow to be like 6 microns across, which is kind of massive when you think about like how many like millions of neural connections that you have in your brain. So think about like you have a new experience saying that like nursing is so difficult and there's no way that I can like enjoy nursing in these conditions. That's like you've thought that thought, you have lived an experience that's reinforced that. But then you have another time that's reinforced that. And then you have another time that's reinforced it, another time, and that neural connection gets stronger and stronger and thicker and thicker. And so just like if you keep hitting the gym, your muscles grow, those brain connections grow, and your brain likes patterns. It's a creature of habit. So your brain will constantly lean on those same neural connections and go back to thinking the same thoughts on repeat. So you think that thought over and over again, your brain is just going to kind of autopilot its way back to going to that same thinking process, which is why we relive a lot of the same experiences and feel the same way over and over on our nursing job. The other thing that's really important to understand is this concept of observation bias. This is basically where your brain, when it thinks something is important to it, will continue to look for evidence to reinforce that belief. So if you are like, I'm the kind of person who is like worst case scenario. I'm just looking for the worst case scenario going into work. You're going to be like, you know what? This is really difficult. Like, I just can't handle this. Like, I know I'm going to have a shitty assignment. I know I'm going to get this complicated patient. Like, it's just going to be terrible. You're walking into work and you spill your coffee on yourself and you're like, oh my God, see, it's going to be the worst day ever. And then you go and the meds aren't in the Pyxis and you have to call pharmacy and you have to wait for the meds to come up and you're like, see, it's going to be the worst day ever. And then you try to go get hand sanitizer from the wall and the hand sanitizer dispenser thing falls off the wall and is broken and you're like, see, it's going to be the best day ever. Or worst day ever. And so your brain keeps looking for all of the evidence to reinforce that belief system that you've already chosen. So that is how we create our experience of a difficult situation, and our brain focuses on those worst case scenarios and keeps reinforcing them. So a concept that I have taught my clients and has been super transformational for me personally, super transformational for my clients. I have taught this in workshops, I've taught this on podcasts, and I think it has been such a transformational process of just shifting those neural connections. So when we think new things, we have to repeatedly think it over and over again to build those stronger neural connections so your brain really gets to wire that new way of thinking. So this is kind of where people are like, is this toxic positivity? No, absolutely not. Toxic positivity is me being like, there's no way I could enjoy nursing in these conditions, to everything is wonderful, amazing, and I absolutely love my job. That is a lie. Your brain is going to think that's a lie. You know that is total BS because it doesn't feel true to you. So finding neutral is basically a bridge to feeling better for your brain. So we can't just jump from everything sucks to everything is rainbows and daisies. That is completely unauthentic for our brain experience. So what we need to do is start reinforcing a new way of thinking and what we choose to focus on. We're using that observation bias to focus on something that feels better. And a lot of the times when we do this, if we find something that feels true to us that's also true, it does help. So it's basically like an in-between thought. Um, from that like worst case to everything is wonderful, we're finding something in between, and generally that neutral thought feels so much better. So a couple of these thoughts that I have laid out here is basically like, I can't keep doing this to myself. There's no way that I can enjoy nursing in these in these conditions. And so when you think that thought, you're like, yeah, like I can just feel it in my chest. Like I can feel the dread. I can feel like the anxiety and frustration. But what happens when you're like, the circumstances are difficult, but I know I can figure this out? What this does is it's validating your experience. I think this is so important when we invalidate ourselves, being like, I should be able to handle this situation. I should be better at this. It creates this like separation with ourselves where we're just like arguing with ourselves and beating ourselves up. A lot of the times we are our own worst critic, and this is going to add to your burnout. It's going to make it so much difficult for you to feel better. So we need to be like, like have that compassion. And that's why I like to just kind of bring in that, like how your brain works. Like your brain is trying to keep you safe. It's trying to avoid the pain and seek pleasure. So avoiding the pain, being like, of course I am dreading this experience. Like it is uncomfortable for me. Like, of course that's true. Like, of course the circumstances are difficult. Like there's no denying that the healthcare system is broken and there's staffing challenges, there's short staffing, there's increased patient acuity, there is poor managers out there. There is no denying that these circumstances are true, but I get to choose what to focus on. And I'm going to validate my experience being like, yes, the circumstances are difficult. And if you want to use your own language, you can be like, the circumstances are shitty, but I am capable of figuring this out. And this goes back to like nurses. There's so much evidence that you have, like you just went through nursing school and you were able to handle that. There's so much evidence that you have that you are resourceful and capable of figuring it out because you've done it over and over and over again. Think about all the times that you've got a patient with a diagnosis that you've never freaking heard of and you had to Google it and be like, oh, okay, that makes sense. Because you have so much knowledge and experience, you can understand things and figure things out, even if you don't necessarily know them. So the circumstances are difficult, but I know that I'm capable of figuring this out is a great neutral thought to feeling better. So every time your brain goes like, I can't keep putting myself in these situations. There's no way I can enjoy my nursing career in these conditions. Then you can be like, you know what? The circumstances are difficult. Like I get that, but I know I'm capable of figuring this out. And sometimes it's like today's going to be the worst day ever to being like, you know what? I'm showing up at work today. That's the best I can offer. And that thought, just like check in with yourself. Like, how does that feel different? You know, like I'm just showing up at work today. I'm just showing up. I'm doing the best I can. That's all I can give today. How does that feel versus like going into work being like, this is going to be terrible. I just know it's going to be terrible. I just know my assignment is going to be shit. Like, it's just going to be terrible. How does it feel different? And then another really great one is like, I've worked too hard to be miserable. This is something like I hear so regularly. Like I have invested so much time, money and effort. Like I have worked so hard to be where I'm at. I have done so much training, so much certifications, all of these skills, all this education. There's no way I could have invested this much time and money and energy to be just this miserable. And then the thought that we can shift to, the neutral thought, is it's possible for me to use my experience to create a nursing career that I enjoy. Now, this is something that I want to point out is that it's possible. You may not think that it's true right now that you could actually enjoy your nursing career, and that's totally okay. That's totally okay. It's possible, or I'm capable of figuring this out. I'm capable of figuring out how to make a career that I enjoy. It's possible is one of those, like, it's a really great bridge thought to what you want to believe. Okay, right now I don't really feel like I can use my experience to create a nursing career and enjoy. So what we say is, it's possible for me, being like, I can figure that out. Like, it's possible for me to come up with a solution to this problem of not enjoying my nursing career. So just notice when you choose something neutral. Maybe it is that, just like, you know what, I'm just showing up at work today. I'm doing my best. I'm showing up at work today. How different does that feel when you think that versus like, it's just going to be shit? How different does it feel? That's like the end of it being like, you know what? It's going to be your experience. You get to focus on what you want. Why wouldn't you want to choose something that feels better? This is basically looking at your situation and being like, yeah, like, I can't always control the staffing ratios, but I do get to control how I interact with this broken healthcare system and how I respond to it. So a case study from one of my clients, we're going to call her client L. So she basically started her profession and very quickly, like, had a lot of trouble in her first nursing job, went to rehab because she thought it would be easier on her system, her body, and really just start into this profession. And then she wanted more experience, so she went into a neuro step down. And for her, she just kept telling herself that she needed to learn more skills. Like, she didn't have what it takes to be able to handle those difficult, like, she was just behind, she couldn't time manage, she couldn't do all these things. And like, she was telling herself all of these things, all of the things that, like, she was doing wrong, basically, like, saying that she was in the wrong because she wasn't able to handle her situation. And what basically was happening was she was, like, invalidating her own experience, her own knowledge, and then also, like, the complexity of her unit. So when we, like, got down to it, like, she's in a really heavy demand, high demand unit, and she was not giving herself credit for that. She was just being like, it's my fault. Like, I'm just the one that's not able. There's something wrong with me because I'm not able to handle this. And so when we kind of created a separation, being like, validating her experience, being like, yes, this is a very difficult unit that has a lot of high demands. And then also recognizing all of the capabilities and the knowledge that she has cultivated over her 3 years of nursing, and realizing that, like, damn, she knows so much. She does know how to handle these situations. She knows who to go to, who her resource people are if she doesn't know things. She has, like, developed so much self-belief and confidence in her nursing practice to be able to handle those stressful situations now. And this is one of those tools that we use a lot, was finding that neutrality to basically validate her current experience of where she is, and then find better feeling thoughts to work her into that place of self-belief, into feeling confident in her nursing practice and recognizing her own knowledge and beliefs. Next, we're going to talk about boundaries. Boundaries are basically just limits that we place physically, emotionally, mentally, that support and protect our well-being. Boundaries are basically how we advocate for ourselves, like we advocate for our patients. We cannot enjoy the work we do if we are completely drained and exhausted. So we need to understand how to use and set personal boundaries that are basically our standards for how we interact with other people. So I love this quote from Brene Brown. This is in her book, The Atlas of the Heart, where she basically talks about, like, boundaries are basically the prerequisite for compassion and empathy. As I said earlier, like, I am definitely an empath. A lot of my clients and other nurses that I work with are empaths, and we need to recognize, because I think a lot of people are like, oh, you need to separate yourself from your patients. You need to, like, basically keep yourself separate, don't get emotionally attached. And I think there is ways that that as empaths makes it so difficult for us, because there's definitely ways where we create too much emotional connection and we struggle to separate ourselves from that patient's emotional experience. But also, when we have emotional boundaries, what we can do is we can care and we can have compassion and we can have empathy for that patient going through a difficult situation, and we can be there for them without it draining us completely, without it like sucking all of our emotions out with them and going through their experience. So basically, Brene Brown is saying, like, we need to understand where we end and where the other person starts to be able to have compassion and empathy without it completely draining us. And I think that is something that is so beautiful. So kind of going over the different parts of basic boundaries. So there's emotional boundaries, as I kind of said, these are basically the things that we need to allow us to have that compassion and compare. There's mental boundaries. These are really important in nursing. This is basically recognizing that everybody has their own emotional experience, their own thinking, thoughts, feelings, actions. People are going to do what people are going to do. People are going to insult you. People are going to be rude to you. That is a reality of nursing. Unfortunately, there is still a lot of bullying that happens in nursing. So other nurses are going to say shit to you. Patients are going to say shit to you. You get to recognize that those are other people's opinions and decide what to do with them. And I love to use the example being like, if I was like, I don't like your blue hair, but you don't have blue hair. So you're like, okay, crazy lady, like my hair's not blue. I just brushed that right off. This is the same thing that my clients have done with boundaries, where they're like, I am so strong in my own convictions of who I am that like you insulting me doesn't even like faze me whatsoever. It just rolls right off because I know that that's not true. And so that's a really important component of boundaries, is being able to know yourself, who you are, so that you can decide, okay, that's not even applicable to me because I don't believe that to be true. Another important one is physical boundaries. And I think this is like your basic needs for your well-being. What do you need to function? It is a physical boundary that like you care for yourself. You actually go pee when your body tells you it's time to go pee. When you need to fuel your body, you need to drink water, you need to eat nutritious food when your body is telling you that it needs those are important. And self-preservation, I think, is also part of this. It's like basically your energy, well-being, and enjoyment are important. That's like saying no to overtime, taking time off to allow for yourself to care, taking your PTO, like taking your mental health days, your sick days, doing what you need to do to take care of yourself and your well-being. And I think creating boundaries is part of a shifting culture in nursing. Being broken for this job is not a badge of honor. It is really the time where we are embracing our empowerment. This is like that selfish nurse era where we're saying like, I am choosing myself because it makes me a better nurse. I'm choosing to take care of myself so that I can enjoy my nursing career, so that I can enjoy my life, and putting my needs above others actually does help me care for them better. So my process that I work with my clients is super simple. You can write this down, you can take a screenshot of it. Basically, what you do to start with is understanding yourself, because just like that, like I'm saying you have blue hair. If you don't know who you are and what you want, it becomes so difficult to know when your boundaries are being crossed. And a lot of the time we don't even recognize it until something happens that we're like, oh, I did not like that experience. And that's a lot of the times when a boundary was crossed. And so we need to understand ourselves first. Then we can define our boundaries. Then it's like clear, okay, where are our boundaries? Like what needs to be said? And a lot of the times, you knowing them, it doesn't actually need to be verbally said. You don't have to be like, this is the boundary you're trying to cross. Sometimes if people, continue to cross your boundaries, like absolutely, you need to draw that line in the sand. But most of the time, these are just things that we need to know, and it dictates how we show up and how we interact with the healthcare system, how with our coworkers and other people in our lives. The third one is just implementing those boundaries. So that is when you actually need to like draw those lines in the sand and say like, this is my boundary. Or when it's like saying no to overtime when you're already drained and exhausted, or you have plans, and not canceling for the fourth time on your friends who you said you'd go out with for like weeks in a row. It is basically saying that you need to take a break when you are mentally done. And the fourth one is navigating what to do if those boundaries get broken. Reality of being human and new at implementing boundaries is that either you're going to break your boundary or somebody else is going to break your boundary. And what to actually do when that happens and how to navigate that is extremely important. And often what we do is we figure out that ahead of time so you know what to do. Because sometimes when you have a boundary cross, you're just kind of floundering, being like, this is really uncomfortable. I don't like it, but I don't really know what to do about it. And then like too much time has passed, and then all you do is just like relive that experience in your brain, and you're just spiraling, being like, next time I would totally say this, but in that moment. So if we come up with that process in advance, and this is what I do with my one-on-one clients, is we come up with this in advance so that if it were to happen, you know exactly what you would do. So another client talking about boundaries is my client D. So she is a nurse, and she was a caregiver of her mother who had chronic illnesses, was going in and out of the hospital. So basically she was a nurse at home and she was a nurse at the hospital. And despite on top of all this, this wonderful woman was picking up overtime, staying late at work. She was like the kind of person, she is the kind of person, not as much anymore, who would be like always trying to help everybody else before helping herself. And because she was literally caring for every single other person, she never said no. And what she ended up being was like, she's like, I literally just feel like a shell of myself. I feel like a zombie. I'm going through the motions. I'm just completely drained, exhausted, and I'm not the daughter, I'm not, the wife that I want to be, because I don't have anything left to give for my personal life. So during our one-on-one coaching, we basically created the clarity around like, okay, like who you actually are and what is most important. And we realized like for her priority at that period of time was caring for her mom, with all who was having all these chronic illnesses and going in and out of the hospital. Like she really wanted to be there for her mother. And so that was her priority. So it was really about implementing her boundaries, saying no without guilt to all that extra overtime so that she could take care of herself and had the energy and the capacity to be with her present and fully present, like mentally, physically, emotionally present with her mom, who was so ill at that time. And her mom did pass away, and like she was just able to be like, you know what? I am so grateful that I was able to be there and like be fully mentally, emotionally there, rather than just like that burnt out shell of a person that I was. And I think that is just such a powerful thing with this work. I mean, it's being like, it's just figuring, I know not every person in situation is the same, but like for my clients who are moms, it's just like being able to set those boundaries so that you have that energetic capacity to be fully present with your kids when you want to be with your kids. You're like going out and doing things with your kids rather than just going through the motions, being like, I actually get to have fun and enjoy this time. Like it's just such an important experience, because nursing is a job at the end of the day. We are human beings. We have life, and we want to live our lives and get to be fully present for our lives. That is like the power of boundaries. So the last topic that I'm teaching today is how to create your best nursing career. So basically, we understood how our brains work, how our brains created a reality. And I do believe that when you understand your brain and you start doing this mindset work, you can choose to feel whatever you want about pretty much any circumstance. But also at the end of the day, why would you want to? If you are in a nursing job that is critically short-staffed, or you have a manager who belittles you and is making your life difficult, like, why would you want to continue to put yourself into that situation? So when we have understood ourselves, we can start to feel better in our work. We can start to set those boundaries and create clear expectations for how we're going to show up and interact with the healthcare system and our jobs, and, doing our jobs, but in a way that feels good to us. Then we get to create this like, okay, so how is my actual nursing job interacting with this? Is my nursing job something, fit me? And this is kind of where I come up with this like concept of basically like it's like loving or leave it. Love it or leave it. Like you get to decide. And so I'm going to talk about one of my clients in a minute, and what she decided, but basically this is kind of where we start to explore like what skills and knowledge do you have that you really enjoy? What are you super good at? Do you love patient education? Do you love inserting IVs? Like, what kind of thing do you do in your job now that you're like, I really enjoy doing this? What are those things? There's so many roles in nursing. There's non-traditional and traditional nursing roles. So when you figure out like what you're really good at, and I don't mean just like what tasks are you really good at? What are you really good at, but also enjoy doing? What are things that people come to you for support with? What are things that are like, oh, this person is really great at such and such. I want to go to them. Like, what are your things that you really enjoy helping patients with? You really enjoy supporting others with? And recognizing that like that is important to you. The other thing that really is important is recognizing that there is no right nursing path. I will say this until I am blue in the face. There is no right nursing path. You do not have to start in med surg and work your way up from there. Yes, med surg is going to give you great experience and time management, but like if you have said you want to be a mom baby nurse from like the moment that nursing was a career path option for you, you going to med surg and wasting a year or two of your life being burnt out, drained, and exhausted before going to mom baby does not really help you. Like, yeah, you learned all that, but does that even apply to mom baby? No, it doesn't. So if you truly know what you want to do not be afraid to advocate for yourself. Do not be afraid to look for opportunities that move you towards that. And yes, I know there's like paths that you have to do in certain areas to get to those things, but continue to look for things that are going to move you towards what you want if you are already like have that strong conviction. Education in nursing is not for everybody. It is for some people. And this is why like for me, I was so grateful that I did not choose to go get my master's degree when everybody was pushing me towards it because I just like didn't feel like what I wanted to do. And so I really love to help my clients when they're working with me one-on-one, just get super clear of like, what do you actually want for your nursing job? And also it comes down to like, what are your non-negotiables? Like, what do you need from your job? Do you need a job that's day shift? Because night shift, like me, I was a complete zombie when I was on nights. I liked the pace while working in nights, but the rest of my life completely suffered while I was working on nights. So night shift was like a no-go for me. I do not want night shift. That is not it for me. Maybe it's just, you need a certain hours. Maybe you need to have a manager that supports you in a certain way. Maybe you need to have certain patient populations. Like, what are your non-negotiables? And then it also comes down to like, what are your, it would be nice to have. What are your wants? What are your needs? And really getting clear on that so that when you look at your current job, you can decide, okay, this actually fits a lot of the boxes. Maybe it is just tweaking, figuring out the way that you're thinking about your job and setting those boundaries to create it into that better experience. Or maybe you're like, you know what, my current job is not it. So then it's looking for new roles that help fill those things. And when you have this clarity, you can go to job interviews and you're like, I already know what I want. And I can ask these managers and straight up be like, you know what, is this your management style? Is this like, what are you going to do if this happens? And see how they can help you and if they're going to be the right fit for you. And the last thing I have on this slide is like, what does success look like for you? I have so many nurses who come to me and they're just so lost and yet they don't have any idea what they want. And this is totally fair because I think healthcare just like completely rocks you to your core. It will beat you up. And if you aren't super clear around what you want, it's so easy to just get lost in the like numbness of just going through the motions in healthcare. So I really encourage all of my clients and I encourage y'all to get really clear on like what would your most ideal nursing career be? Like what would success look like for you? Would it be leadership role? Would it be more education? Would it be that like what would your success look like for your career? When you define it, when you have this conviction around like this is my goal, this is my path, it becomes so much easier to navigate things when you have that like end goal. Maybe it is like just staying in your current role, but like doing more with like nursing practice councils and like improving the quality of this profession in your hospital. So those kinds of things like are all part of like what does your success look like to you specifically? So my best nursing career process is to start with the 3Ds, define your nursing strengths, determine your needs and wants. Those are like your non-negotiables. What are things that would be nice to have? What are things that you need to have in your career? And the third thing is decide it to love it, leave it. So if you decide to love it, then it goes back to understanding your brain. It goes back to creating, like setting those boundaries. It goes back to like really taking care of yourself in a way that feels good to you, to have that energy and capability to be able to handle your current nursing job and create it into what you want. If you choose to leave it, then we have those additional 2 steps. That is basically finding the jobs that fit your needs. It's less about what that job title is. It's more about like what the job actually entails. So when I have clients who are looking for, I was like, look at the description, not the title, because titles can be completely useless at times. So figuring out that, and don't be afraid to interview and ask questions. And then the fifth step is actually making that transition. And again, it goes back to, we got to figure out who you are, what you want, setting those boundaries, setting those, that understanding of your brain, understanding of what your bodily needs are, so that you have the energy and capacity to handle that role. Because every single role is going to have its challenges. Our healthcare system is broken, and understanding that like maybe the situation may be different from one unit to the next, but at the end of the day, we still have to deal with and engage with this system, which is going to have its challenges. So when you understand that and can prepare for it, it just makes life so much easier. So another client story for this section, your best nursing career, and I realize there's a major typo there. Oops. So my client, so she basically was a new grad nurse practitioner, worked in cardiac care before. So she was like, I want to be a cardiac nurse practitioner, got hired in a cardiac unit. And this was kind of like a blended outpatient, inpatient role. And they were kind of like new to having a nurse practitioner in that role. So she basically started in this being like, it's going to be my dream job, I'm going to love it. And then got there and there was like no clear role boundaries. It was just like basically just like people giving her tasks of like, go do this. And she felt like this ping pong ball, like being like knocked all over the place and constantly like doing things, but not having like a clear and defined role for like what she actually needed to do, what she needed to accomplish. And so she didn't feel like she was like making a difference. She didn't feel like she was making that impact, because she was literally just like running around in circles with her, trying to accomplish tasks. So she came to me being like, I am just so burnt out, drained, exhausted. I'm overwhelmed in this role. And I don't know, like, I think I just need to leave it and find a new nursing role. And what we really worked together to figure out is like what was most important to her and like what she actually wanted in a role. And because this was a poorly defined role, we actually created this self-belief, this confidence, and developed her leadership skills to be able to create that role into what she wanted. She like defined everything, created a process for it, and like, got all of the approval of the management and the doctors and everybody was on board. So she took a role that she thought that like wasn't for her, and she was able to create it into something that was her best role. And I think this is something that's so important, because no matter like what kind of nursing you're doing, even if it's bedside nursing, sometimes it does have all of the opportunities that we want, but if we aren't aware of it and we're not like intentionally creating it into something, it's so easy just to get drained and sucked down into like the brokenness of this healthcare system. So we really have to be super intentional in creating that. And so this was so important for her to be able to create those skills and define it and create her career into something that she is truly proud of and feels good to her. So, kind of to recap everything that we've covered how our brain works, how to find this neutral so that you can start feeling better. We've talked about boundaries, emotional, physical, self preservation, so that you have the energy and capacity to feel good, so you can leave work at work and live a life beyond the hospital. And lastly, we talked about creating your best nursing career. So that's letting go of all the shoulds and finding your right path so that you can feel that you are making a difference and enjoy the career that you have chosen and all of your hard work is actually paid off. So if you feel like you've gotten everything that you needed from this masterclass, amazing. I am so glad that you were able to come and get this information. And you're welcome to jump off the call now. If everything that we've talked about is hitting home for you and you're ready to keep taking action and start creating this career that you actually want to be a part of, I'm going to talk about what it is like to work with me and work together on a one-on-one basis. So you can kind of decide like if that is a good fit for you. So my coaching program, basically we do one-on-one coaching calls every single week. We meet with my clients for 1 hour over Zoom. This is basically a time where I walk through my 5-step coaching process. Like we talked about those things like implementing those boundaries, figuring out like what your next steps are going to be. So it's completely customizable. And when I get on a burnout triage call, this is basically that call where we go over where you are, what your needs are. We create that like blueprint plan. And then our coaching calls are really honing in and digging into that. So we dig into where you are, what's going on, like how to implement and actually have that accountability to take action over time to create that nursing career. So we do that one-on-one weekly coaching calls. Also, another service that I offer is Voxer support. Voxer is basically just an app that you can like text or do voice memos in. And this is super helpful for my clients because my clients will like have a really difficult day at work and then they'll just vent on Voxer and we'll be able to take that venting session and like, sometimes you just need a vent, but a lot of the times we want to move past that experience. So being able to help them take away what they want to take away from that experience and move forward from it in like feeling better and actually creating change. So those situations don't happen as much, or you move through those difficult situations more quickly and get back to feeling your best self. So those are like the things that I tend to work on with my clients. This is over 6 months. And I tell you that it is 6 months for a reason because it always seems to happen like that 2 or 3 month, life happens. Something comes up in their personal lives that affect the way that they show up in their professional life. And when we can overcome those things together, when we can use my process and the tools to be able to handle those difficult situations, it grows so much strength and capability in yourself to be able to do this in the future because I want all of my clients to really be resourceful and capable nurses who can figure this out long after we've worked. I have the goal that you have like lifelong burnout resilience. And so it really is like teaching you these tools and helping you overcome those situations. And I think that's why 6 months is so vital. 6 months is also the perfect amount of time for if you're choosing that leave it route for your nursing job, being able to have that time to figure out where you want to go, to start applying, to go through that interview process, to transition and create that new role into something that you want. 6 months is that like perfect amount of time to actually get that process moving. And if you haven't actually transitioned by the end of the 6 months, you have that clear path of how you're going to do it and what you're going to do and how you're going to go through that process. Masterclass. So that is why I chose 6 months, because it is like that perfect amount of time to create sustainable change and results for your nursing career. If that sounds like something that you need, if all the things that have been hitting home throughout this whole master class, you're like, yes, I need the support so that I can do this work more quickly. Absolutely. You can follow this information, you can apply things on your own, but to have that accountability and create the momentum, having that coach and that partner to really work with you and keep you moving on these goals, I think is so vital, which is why I always will work with a coach for that exact reason. It's just committing, especially when you're in that state of burnout, is like, like at least I have 1 hour every week that I commit to myself. And I think that's such a beautiful experience. So if that sounds like something that you are interested, I highly encourage you to book a burnout triage call. This is basically where we go over where you are now, what your burnout experience is, how to fix it, and what it would look like to work together. So we would go over your specific situation and what things we would implement in coaching to help heal your burnout and help you figure out a nursing career that you can actually enjoy. All right, that is all of the things that I have to talk about today. We will jump into questions. If you're watching the replay, feel free to email me back with questions, or you can send messages on Instagram with your questions that you have.